And we are live. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Okay. Anyway, I'm here today with Amy B. Scher. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Perfect. You got it.
Okay. And she's the author of The Unexpected Afterlife of Th Rose. Now, I have to tell you, I picked this book up because I was so intrigued by the synopsis. It's very different than books I usually read. But I just could not walk away from this when I was offered a chance to get a copy and participate in the tour that Tanya, our wonderful leader, organizes with the thriller book lovers, The Pulse. And if you aren't following the account, you need to follow that account and follow Tanya, because she finds us the most wonderful authors and books. And a lot of times it's authors I've never heard of before. And sometimes they have a whole backlist that I've managed to miss because, you know, there's so many books out there in the universe. And this was a situation where I just couldn't say no. And then I was so glad that I did, because this is such a unique concept. This is about a young girl named Th Rose, who finds herself suddenly in a place she never expected to be. Basically, she all of a sudden realizes she's died. So right away, I'm like, what? And she's trying to figure out, first of all, how did this happen? Because she has no memory of dying. And she finds herself in a very strange place that she has to try to figure out how to navigate. Then she starts meeting people there. And the thing that got me about this book is what the inspiration was and the time it took to write it. And we're going to talk about all of that. But it's just a book that, if you've ever lost someone, and I will be very blunt, I've lost a lot of people. I've lost my parents, of course, because I'm older. So that's the natural order of things, right? My sister, I only had one sibling. I lost my sister in 2013. I've lost a couple of very, very dear friends. And last year, my husband died. So I have done that route of mourning people and grieving. And this is a book that helps you explore that. But it's so funny, too, in many ways. And it's through a group of young people. And it's a very comforting read. At least I thought it was. And it's just hugely entertaining. The book showed up with this packet of very clever materials, but I also have to show you the inside of the book, because this is Th Rose's journal that she's keeping as she's on this journey in the afterlife. And so every once in a while in the book, you have these pages inserted that are her thoughts, because she is trying to solve a case. And so you go on a journey with her to solve the case. And there's also her notebook. So I didn't actually write in mine, because you know what? I'm going to give this to my grandniece because she loves notebooks. And there's a couple of stickers, and it all came in this great envelope with a case file. Dun, 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 which I loved, you know, being a former lawyer, retired lawyer, or as some people like to say, recovering lawyer. That was just all kinds of fun too. So, Amy, I'm going to quit blabbering. Let's hear from you.
You did so great. I feel like I have to take you to all of my events, because it just is so clear that you got the book, that you loved it, that you poured over every page, and just you explained it so well. And that's one of the hardest things for authors to do, is to explain what their book is about, because we start panicking. No matter how long we spent with the book, it's like, well, which part should we talk about and how fast do we have to go? But you did beautifully. So you are going to have to come on tour with me.
Hey, depending on where you're going, I might just pack my suitcase.
Perfect. You know, I love it.
We could have a girls trip. That would be fun.
I
have a feeling you and I could get up to some mischief.
Oh, definitely. 100%.
Anyway, I want to talk about your background a little bit, because I find it fascinating how you arrived where you are today. You have a very different background than many authors do, certainly many that I speak with. Tell folks about how you grew up. Were you a big reader as a kid, your education? And I want to hear about your professional pursuits that go along with this, because I think I'm of the belief that those things inform our writing.
Definitely, definitely. So I am a nonfiction author, primarily nonfiction author until this book. Now my friends keep saying, no, now you get to say you're a fiction author, but it's hard.
Right?
This book only came out a week ago, so I'm still getting used to it. I grew up loving to read. And when I got into my teenage years, I started devouring books on spirituality and self-help. I was a hippie child of hippie parents. I grew up in Southern California. Um,
Ah,
we had the famous Bart's Bookshop, which is the biggest outdoor bookstore, I believe, in the world, in Ojai, California, which is about 90 minutes north of Los Angeles, close to
yep,
where I lived. And I
yep.
would go there and I would find all of the spiritual books. And I was like, 10, 11, 12. It was like in my, early teen years. And so I read primarily nonfiction as a teenager. And as I got into my 20s, I started having health problems. And I was eventually, after a 10-year stint of suffering with chronic Lyme disease, where I was bedridden and in a wheelchair, I turned to mind, body, spirit medicine as part of my healing journey. And so I always was really into nonfiction. I read nonfiction, I lived nonfiction, I studied nonfiction, and I never went to college. So it's kind of interesting to become a writer when I actually don't know that many rules about writing, which sometimes I say might have helped me a little bit, right? Because I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And sometimes I think in creative works, that's best. But essentially, all I ever knew was nonfiction. When I was little, I read picture books and, I read all the Judy Blume books. I did all of that when I was in, middle grade. But I really only read nonfiction. It wasn't until actually probably like the last 10 years that I started reading fiction. And I think it was after I became a nonfiction author and I had healed. I had done all this healing work to heal myself. And spoiler alert, I'm fine now. I do not have Lyme disease. I'm not in a wheelchair. I'm fully functional. Yes. I healed completely. And I ended up writing a series of nonfiction books about my healing work, what that mind body healing work that helped bring me back to health. And once I healed, I didn't really want to read spirituality or nonfiction anymore. It was like I wasn't really interested in that. And that's when I turned to fiction and started reading mysteries and young adult and thrillers. But really my whole life I was such a fan of nonfiction. And that's mostly what, and you can see, as you read it, you can see there's pieces of my nonfiction brain and work and heart in this book, although it is fiction.
Now that's interesting that once you were healed, you were done.
I don't have an interest in that stuff. I do
Yeah.
professionally because I teach healing work. I teach mind body medicine. I have multiple books on the topic, best-selling books that are translated into 20 languages. Like in my nonfiction workspace, in my professional space, I have interest from a professional standpoint, but outside of work, I have absolutely no interest in reading any of that anymore because I think fiction is such a great escape from our past, our present, our work, all of the things.
Yeah, that's like me when I was still working. I'd come home and the last thing I was going to pick up was a nonfiction book because I've been reading
Absolutely.
nonfiction all day and sometimes
Exactly.
gruesome. So I wanted to just escape into, and now that's pretty much all I read is fiction because I just
Same.
saturated my brain with case files and transcripts and
Of
investigative
course.
reports,
Of
all that
course.
stuff. So I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear that because I always think I must be weird. I don't want to read nonfiction, but apparently I'm sort of normal.
I'm with
Um,
you.
how did you get into doing that professionally then?
So after I healed from chronic Lyme disease, when I put together essentially the connection between mind and body and how our emotions, when they're unprocessed or we have old limiting beliefs or we, hold on to old traumas, how that affects us at a biological level that actually can contribute to illness. And so I did a lot of study for myself, really. It was just for myself to help myself heal better because I had essentially been to all the doctors in the US. I even went for a stem cell transplant in India to try to heal from chronic Lyme disease. And nothing was working until I really addressed that mind body connection. And when
Wow.
I did that, I studied certain techniques. I created my own self healing techniques, and they ended up in a book called How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. This was my first nonfiction book in 2016. So it was 10 years ago. I was actually pitching another book to editors at the time. I was pitching a memoir, and one of the editors said, "We can't buy the memoir, but what about a book that shares with people all of the things you learned and did to help heal yourself when no one else could heal you?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to be an author and I never knew what to write about. So, okay, I'll do it." And that's how that first book was born. And it really, really took off. And so I ended up doing a series on that topic.
So now you teach, you do seminars?
I teach, I do classes, I teach at hospitals. My work is in medical organizations. I see limited amount of clients, but I work one-on-one with clients. And I've been doing that, since before the book came out, but really, really full time since 2012. So it's been a while. And I
And when
never
you go to the
intended, yeah,
no,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I never intended to write fiction. I just thought, oh, that's my job, that's my life, and that's what I'm gonna do. But life is funny.
Yeah. So my question is, when you go into like medical settings and you're talking to medical professionals, so you're teaching them how to blend this idea of the mind doing the work with Western medicine. Is that the deal?
Yeah, so essentially, I'm teaching them the techniques that I use in my work that can be integrated with Western medicine to help improve results, to help improve people's healing capability, and to reduce anxiety and stress when somebody's going through a medical trauma, a medical rehabilitation of any sort.
Got it. Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah,
That's
it's really
really
cool.
needed work. Really needed work. I have a friend who a few years ago went to Stanford, of all places.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
mother had cancer. And when they went to the Stanford Medical Center, she reached out to me. She said, "You're not going to believe what happened. I walked in and I know we had the right doctor because the woman came through the door to meet with them in the exam room. And the first thing they noticed is that she was wearing a Reiki healing
Oh,
symbol necklace,
yeah.
the chakra symbol." And I
Yeah.
went, "Oh, you got the right place. The universe sent
Perfect.
you needed to be." So
That's
that's
perfect.
fascinating.
And
Yeah.
it's so needed. It's so needed because stress and trauma and our beliefs about our medical outcomes have a huge impact on our biological functioning. And when we can work with that, we can actually help to improve our chances of a healthy life. And so it's really cool that universities and that hospitals and that medical organizations are welcoming this work. So it's really, really special.
It's really needed. Do you also work with people who have to just face the fact that they are at the end of their life and help them make that transition?
You know what? I actually don't work with a lot of people. I mean, if I have had a few clients that, were at end stage sort of, disease, and that's always really tough. And what I do in that situation is just try to help relieve some of that anxiety and fear and all of the normal emotions, but help to process and relieve that in the healthiest way possible so they can be as present as possible toward the end. But I would say the large majority of people I work with, the large majority, thank goodness, do find improvement in the work, do heal. It's people with autoimmune diseases, people with chronic infections, long COVID, all of these things, and a lot of emotional stuff, depression, anxiety, all of that too. So luckily, I'm in the business of working with people who don't feel good, but I'm also in the business of helping them feel better, which is such a blessing.
So needed. Excellent. Because, medicine is difficult these days, to say the
Yeah,
least, with the trying to navigate all of it. And if you have somebody that can help you with the stress, holy moly, the just dealing with the billing is, and is it
I
covered?
know. It's a whole
It's a
thing.
nightmare. And that's for people that have insurance. I mean, we won't even talk about the number that
I
don't.
know. I know.
So let's talk about the inspiration for the book, because I find it so fascinating that you could take two events, as I understand it, in your
Yes.
life and use them to produce something so beautifully written.
Thank you. So the inspiration for this book is real. It comes from kind of a nonfiction place, right? Because in 2011, in the same week, my dad died, and 5 days later, my 22-year-old cousin was murdered. This was I mean, one at the beginning of the week, one at the end of the week, and obviously it was unexpected and tragic and unimaginable loss in such a short period of time. And I knew at some point, because I'm a true writer at heart, that I wanted to write about it. that I didn't want to write nonfiction for the privacy of my family, and also just because it wasn't the story of loss wasn't really the story I wanted to tell. The story of healing and moving on when it feels like there's no hope for a future, that was the story I wanted to tell. And so in the months and years, first years after their passings, I started to think about, as we were preparing for trial in my cousin's case, I knew what we were doing. We were all asking questions. How could this happen? Trying to figure out what would happen with the trial. And I suddenly wondered what she would think about all this. Like, what would she say to me if she, could talk? And when I asked that question, I don't know, to the universe, to myself, maybe to her, and she reached it, I started hearing her talking to me. And what I heard was not a story about just tragedy and grief. What I heard was her coming through in her vivacious, funny personality that she had here on Earth. What I heard from her was essentially WTF. Like, what? What? Are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me that this happened? And so I started writing down some of what, whether it was in my imagination or real, will we ever know? Who knows? But I started writing down some of what she said, and some of what came to me was like, from her was like, oh no, oh no. I am not going down without a fight. I am going to figure out the details. I'm going to figure out what happened. I am going to do this. And so it sort of came to me as like, wow, could I write about this journey in a funny, it's darkly funny, right? Because it has a heavy theme, but like in a darkly funny way that helps people do what I do in my nonfiction work, which is process difficult emotions, but could I do it in a way that makes it more accessible to people? I mean, and at first I was really just writing for my family. I always say I was writing to make my family LOL again because, I wanted my cousin's voice to come through and her spirit to still be alive. And
Right.
after a while, I started realizing, not really until it came out, did I realize, oh my gosh, like people are emailing me and saying, this book changed my life. This book felt like therapy. I mean, I didn't mean to write it to that point, but I meant to write it in a way to help people just process a really difficult thing and maybe like find some levity along the way and humor, because I also think that's a coping mechanism that helps us heal.
Right. And it's important, I think, to remember people and the way they live, not the way they died.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that's such a great point. That's something I've been talking about a lot too, because, Salon Rose dies, and at first she does what I was doing and what the family was doing, which was obsessing over questions and answers that we needed. And it felt like at first to me that there could be no peace or moving on until we knew what happened and why, right?
Right. Right.
Because it was such a senseless tragedy. And by senseless, it just literally none of it made sense. We didn't understand why, we didn't understand who, we didn't understand how. And I think after a while, what I learned through writing is that those things in the end don't really matter. You usually don't get all the answers. And when you do, guess what? They're not good enough anyway. There's no answer I could ever get about what happened that would make me go, okay, now it's wrapped in a nice bow. And so I wrote this book with my main character trying to find answers while she's also watching her family, friends, and boyfriend on the other side doing the same. So she's able to see them. And so I wanted to show that parallel journey, right? We think we're the only ones going through it, but if we could imagine that our loved ones on the other side are also learning their own lessons, figuring out how to move on, I feel like we would feel more of a connection. Like we're all doing the same things, just not in the same place anymore.
Well, and if you believe folks like John Edward, you probably know who he is.
I do, yes.
I've been to see him in person a few times. I got to tell you, he's eerie because
He's amazing.
some of the stuff he comes up with, and I see the faces on people that he's
Yep.
given messages to, and they're like, how does
Yes.
he know that? And they clearly were not planted in the audience. So I've heard
No.
people go, oh, he just plants them. And then I've heard people talk about, he can read body language and this and that and the other. Yeah, sure, there's probably some of that. But I also know there are people who have just walked out completely stunned because
Yes.
they can't figure out where he can get such specific information. So is it real? I don't know. I kind of like to think that they're watching us somehow and sending us
They are.
messages, like,
They are.
but, I just think it's really important to focus on they were here, they lived, they mattered, that kind of thing. And try to, I find that, at least in my case, over the years, how people died, I don't think about as much. I think about conversations we had or good times or memories,
Yeah.
that, of things that
Yeah.
we did together, that kind of stuff. That stuff kind of fades, I think, which is just the natural healing process,
It
maybe.
is. It is. And because at first I mean, for my nonfiction work and my healing work, I know that we think that if something makes sense to us, we'll feel better.
Yeah.
But that's not a fact. And in the beginning we did like we you
She said that to a lawyer. I'm just putting that out there. Everything has to be logical, facts, evidence,
yeah.
and so it's hard to get my brain sometimes to.
Yeah. And I do think in law that's true, but I don't think it always helps our heart to know that that's what I'm getting at. It's right. It doesn't
Right,
always just because it makes sense doesn't mean we go, okay, that's great. Now I understand it and move on. So
right,
it's really difficult in that way. But I think as time goes on, we care less about making it make sense. And, we talk about the afterlife, and I absolutely now completely believe in the afterlife. In fact, for this book, I consulted a couple of mediums to help me figure out how to best plot this out because while it's inspired by my cousin Pam, it's fiction. It doesn't follow the exact case. And there's a
right.
couple reasons for that. One, again, the privacy of my family. And two, what I really learned was that fiction isn't always like real life doesn't always make the best story. And what I wanted to do with this couldn't have been done with the real story. And I also didn't want to live in the real story. And so I created this world that, has the mystery so we can all relate to these questions that we're always trying to figure out and what happened and what were the details. But I really had a lot of creative liberty to write a different book because it's fiction, which was so new for me.
All right, so let's get into the book because, of
Yes.
course, that's why we're here. We want people to read your book because I'm telling you, you will feel better about life and death when you're done.
Thank
Um,
you.
I just found it so entertaining, and it was so unique. I didn't know where in the heck the story was going, which was part of the fun. There's nothing about a predictable book that I'm going to enjoy. And I was like, where is she going to take this
Yeah.
story? So tell folks a little bit about your characters. Now, your lead character, Salon Rose,
Yeah.
is really smart, and she had very dear friends. She had her
Yes.
little tribe, which I could really relate to. And she had a boyfriend. I mean, she was just a normal kid
She was a
growing
normal
up.
kid. Yes.
Take it from there.
Yeah, and she says after she died, "Last week I was just a normal teenager. What happened to me?" And I think a lot of us end up feeling like that at different points of our life. Like last week or last year, I was like, "What happened to my life?" So Salon is 17 years old. She ends up dead, and she ends up in somewhere called the Nowhere in Between. And in the Nowhere in Between is essentially an afterlife school. And she ends up in an afterlife support group with four other kids and
Right,
a teacher or mentor named Mr. Eck, who was a former school psychologist who is also dead.
right,
And so she ends up in this world, and all of these kids, their mission or their final destination is to really get to the big if, the big infinite forever, which is their final landing place. But first, they have to go through afterlife school, which none of them are that happy about. But Salon is most unhappy about this because she can't believe after what's happened to her that she has to, that she has to do work to get to her final destination. So along with her, we have Shelby, who's a cheerleader and died of chronic Lyme disease, which I know thing or two about. Luckily, I didn't end up on the other side. I didn't end up in the nowhere in between. Um, and Shelby is struggling with, watching her family left behind and the effects of not only her own illness, but some things that are happening with her family that are affecting her mom. We have Brando, who died in a car accident. He was driving too fast on prom night, and he doesn't know if his girlfriend is alive. So that's its own mystery. Um, and then we have Donatella, who is a Gen Z podcaster who died shortly after meeting her hero, Reese Witherspoon. Unfortunately, she was struck by Reese Witherspoon's tour bus and met her demise. But she says that Reese was so great. If she had to go out, that was an okay way to go. And then we have Olivia slash Liv for short, who doesn't want to talk about her death. And no one really knows what happened. And most of the kids in the Nowhere in Between are leaving it alone, but Salon doesn't leave anything alone, as you know now. And so she is very suspect of Olivia and is constantly pushing to figure out what happened. So they're in the support group doing exercises. They also have a telescope where they view their loved ones at home. And so they're constantly running back and forth to the telescope, which they nicknamed Telly, to see what's going on at home, not only for Salon to watch her case, but to make sure that her two best friends and her mom and her boyfriend are okay too.
But Telly is a reward in some
Telly
ways.
is not.
That gives them Telly time.
Yes, Telly is not always available. And actually, I have to show you this really cool thing I have on my desk, and I've never showed anybody on a live stream before, but my wife had a real Telly made for me to sit on my desk, and it's actually a telescope that works, and it says Telly on it. Isn't that beautiful?
How
And
nice.
I hope they're using one of these to watch us all now. Wouldn't that be so cool?
That would be fun. That would be great.
And there's
wow.
there's the typical teenage drama where someone breaks Telly and then everyone's mad at them because Salon can't check on her case and everything's moving really fast. And they're sort of balancing something I think we all balance, which is trying to move on, but looking back to try to figure out how to do that. Right. And so that's like this conundrum in the afterlife where it's like, all Salon really wants to do is watch everybody at home, but she has work to do in order to move on from that. And so it causes sort of this inner conflict with her.
But you got several mysteries. First of all, what the heck happened to Salon Rose? Who killed her? So people who like murder mysteries grab this book because it's one of the most unique murder mysteries you're ever going to read, and trying to figure it all out. I mean, I didn't guess right. I'll tell you right now. I'm pretty good at this. I read a lot of mysteries, and I went, oh, man. When I figured it out, I went, no, can't be. Oh, yeah, it was. So bravo to you.
Thank you.
And there's also a message within when you solve the mystery. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes, that's a good thing to say.
Yeah, we don't want to go into what it is, but especially for female readers, there's a message in there. Let's just leave it at that without spoiling it. There's also mysteries surrounding Olivia.
Yes.
Yeah. What in the heck happened to her? Then we have the mystery about the girlfriend who was in the car. Is she alive or not? But Mr. X.
Yes.
Also, I kept going, why is he here? And then there was mention of the fact that Mr. X has these classes that come through, but he stays there. I'm like, well, why isn't he going to the Big If?
Why doesn't he get to graduate, right? It's a big mystery.
It's just like his calling to be the, I kept going back to Heaven Can Wait. It's one of my all-time favorite movies, the Warren Beatty, it was like 1978, and Buck Henry, and Buck Henry's the way station guy, remember all that?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe he's like Buck Henry. He's just the guy, his job is to escort people, and that's what he does for Trinity. Mr. Eck is the educator because he was a school counselor, right?
Yeah.
But eventually you tell us what's up with all that.
He has his own story.
It's just so clever.
Thank you.
And how long did it take you? I mean, you have quite the imagination. I could never have come up with this. I can tell you right now, no imagination, okay? Which is why being a lawyer was perfect because I had to stick to the facts.
So this is funny.
I would be lousy at lying to the court because I wouldn't be able to make up any stories. I can't work at the DOJ these days. But anyway, political humor, sorry. How did you come up with all of this, and how long did it take you?
So it took me a long time. It took me about 10 years off and on to write it. However, the funny thing about this book is it was not a mystery until like the last year of writing it. It was never a murder mystery. Never.
Really?
There were mysterious things within the book, but the murder mystery wasn't a big part of it. I turned it into a murder mystery sort of at the last minute. And this book was my most challenging book to write because I also don't consider myself as someone who has a good imagination. I'm a middle child. I'm a Virgo. I'm practical. I'm pragmatic. I like things to make sense. I'm organized. I like to know what's going to happen. And so this book took me so long to write because I had to learn to stretch into that part of my brain that could make anything up. It was so hard for me, and I was overwhelmed by the idea that I could create any storyline, and it was really difficult for me, and I almost thought I wouldn't ever finish this book. But I think it was a good exercise for somebody who's so practical and so, like, I always say, like, I never had an imaginary friend. I never wanted to play anything when I was little that wasn't realistic. Like, I wasn't like a kid that in that way, right? Like, I was always sort of, older, I think, more mature. And so this book was a huge challenge because I had to ask myself, what's the next crazy thing that I could make happen? And in my real life, I'm always trying to avoid the next crazy thing that would happen. And so, it was hard for me to, first of all, imagine these characters and then make up an entire life story for each one. And then have those entire life stories integrate into each other's life stories. And then I had to have everyone's family at home that they watch through telly have their own thing going on. So it was
Right.
really, really challenging. But the more I pushed myself into, you can do anything, you can make up anything, you can create anything, um, it really helped. I do think I pulled a lot from my nonfiction side of things, just knowing how we work as human beings, knowing what we suffer with and from, knowing the judgments we have about ourselves and others. That helped me form characters. And I also think, even though I was new to writing fiction and new to writing mystery, my clients come to me with a mystery. They almost always don't know why they don't feel good, even if they have a diagnosis. They have chronic fatigue, they have anxiety, whatever doctor has diagnosed them, even when it's accurate, the medicine isn't working, the therapy is not working. And so people come to me with a mystery, and people want to unravel what's going on and understand it in a new way. And I feel like in the end, that's what I helped Salon do, is unravel what something looked like on the surface and figure out how to see her life in a new way. And so, like, I did write a mystery, but I also brought it from my real life experience.
That's fascinating that you didn't put the mystery in from the beginning.
No, I avoided it. I avoided it. It was the last like the last year, where my editor said to me, the publisher said to me, who was also my editor, he said, I know you don't want this to be a mystery. It was definitely just a coming of age. That's what I wanted to write. I wanted to write, like the subtitle says, a coming of age while dead story. And that's what it was from the start. But he said to me, I know it's not really a mystery, but it's also not a mystery. We have a dead body. It starts with a dead body, and
Right.
we don't know how the person died. And that's a mystery, isn't it? And so I just worked tirelessly with many tears and lots of coffee to turn it into a mystery. But I'm so glad I did. I really am so glad, because I think it's more rewarding to read.
I'm shocked to hear that it was that hard, because that effort is not on the page.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
flows seamlessly, like it just came out of your brain, just and just went on the page. That was the end of it. And this is a great lesson for us as readers to realize how much work often goes into books like this, where we're just like, dum 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 dum. Oh, that was
Yeah.
great. Somebody has poured their soul and their efforts into it.
And you're
So
reading, and a reader is reading like the 20th, 30th, 40th draft sometimes. People ask me how many drafts. I say I lost track, because I read it, even the last time that I got it back from my publisher. I mean, I probably read it 3 or 4 times in the last 2 weeks that I had it on my desk. So you lose track, because when you write, you have to layer things in, and then you have to read it again to make sure it makes sense. And then you add something, but then you got to read it again from the beginning. So it's a lot. It's really a lot.
it is. I was on a Zoom with Chris Whitaker. I think this was last year. He wrote one of the most beautiful books of last year, All the Colors of the Dark.
Yeah.
And the one before that, We Begin at the End. Oh my God, I just love his book. But he said he had read All the Colors of the Dark like 100 times.
Yeah. Oh, I've definitely done that. I've
And
definitely
it's
done that.
600 and something pages. I mean, stop and think about the countless hours that went into that book to make it
Yes,
what it is. I mean,
absolutely.
I totally appreciate that kind of labor. And you do have, I mean, okay, so you brought it up. I have to tell people the first line in the story. The first dead body I ever see is my own. Well, who's going to stop reading this? I mean, come on. Then the next line is no. The next line is no, and the next line is no. I mean, what an opening, right? I'm not hold that up so people can see it. Well, I'm hooked. Of course, the page is going to be flipping by quickly to put down. Why is she looking at her own dead body? So I take it then you were kind of pantsing it as opposed to being a total plotter.
So that's a good question, because I tried so hard to be a plotter, because that's my personality. I wanted the whole book planned out. I spent countless hours. I would cry to calculate the hours I spent plotting, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. What I learned along the way worked best for me is to write a chapter and then stop for a second and ask myself, what needs to happen in the next chapter to keep the story going? And there was no way to do that for me in advance, because sometimes, and I teach writing, and so I always tell my students, some people know what they want to write and then they write it. Some people need to write it to know what they want to write. And I'm one of the people that needs to write to find out what I want to write. And so I write a lot of stuff that doesn't work. And then I'm like, okay, well, I can eliminate that from something that needs to be in the book. And so I did that a lot. So going chapter by chapter, really helped. That first line that you just read was the first line I ever wrote, and it never changed. It's been the first line for 10 years. While so much of the book has changed, characters have changed, that line never changed. Salon's name never changed. And the best friends never changed, but everything else is different. But I love that line because it stuck. And the book used to have a prologue, which is now on the which is now part of the story on the very last page of the book. So some of my very early writing, things that I knew, are still there, but everything else I have figured out along the way, really.
So a lot of the characters came into your brain as you were working from chapter to chapter. You didn't going in, you didn't know, okay, it's Salon, these are her friends, this is Mr. F. You didn't have all that plotted out.
No, and there were also many more characters in the Nowhere in Between that I had to kill off because they were boring. So these poor characters, R.I.P. twice, right?
You killed them again,
Those poor kids killed twice. They died by whatever they died by, and then I had to kill them again. But I realized that the characters in the Nowhere in Between really they all had to have their own full life.
Yeah.
Their own, their own interesting personalities, their own missions, their own reasons for trying to get to the afterlife. And some of the characters I wrote just didn't end up having that. And so, I think that was just part of the process. So I think there were 3 or 4 characters, 3 or 4 teenagers that didn't make it into the final draft.
And, you brought up a good point, because they are teenagers and their dialogue and their thought processes are so genuine. Having raised 2 kids, hello, I know how they think. I was a kid myself, but having had teenagers in the house, and listening to I used to hide when my kids' friends would come over. I'd be around the corner.
Yeah,
I'm sure every parent does that, but it rings true. The way they're thinking, the way they're behaving, the way they talk to each other, it all rings true. None of it sounds forced or what's the word I want? Contrived. They seem like just real kids, just behaving the way real kids would act.
Yeah. And I work with a lot of teenagers. So in that aspect, I feel like I know them. And then I have 3 nephews and a niece. I also have a cousin who's much younger than me who read it and just made sure that I wasn't saying things phrases that we used when, I'm going to be 47 years old. So we were, sometimes I used phrases that I used as a teenager, and she was like, oh, we don't say that that's not a phrase anymore. I also had to really resist, using phrases that were newer that kids use, because I don't know, by the time this book is a year old, are those phrases not going to be in anymore, right? And there were a lot of references in the very beginning to different music, and I decided to cut it out because I thought, by the time people read this, it takes about 2 years from the time you get a book deal to the time the book comes out. And I thought, well, in 2 years, half of these people could be canceled in today's world, so who knows? maybe,
right?
these won't last. Maybe somebody won't know who it is. So I tried to take out a lot of the cultural references, except for the ones that teenagers still seem to know now, like, Bon Jovi and like some of those. But things that I thought were teenagery, my niece would say, "Oh, that's for moms." And I thought, wait, I thought that was for teenagers. She said, "Oh, everyone says it's for teenagers." But like, she said that about Taylor Swift. She said, "No, Taylor Swift is for moms now." And I was like, she is? So stuff I didn't know. I don't have kids, but I'm definitely more mom age than teenager. So I
Yeah.
had to get the intel from the kids on all this.
Oh, isn't that funny? And
Mhm.
okay, so my kids are in their 30s now, right?
Yeah.
And so I hear some of these phrases, I ask them, and they go, "I don't know, Mom. I've never heard that." And I guess the kids say that. And I'm like, wait a minute,
Because your
but
babies
that's how
are little.
fast the culture
Yep.
changes. They don't even know. And they just look at me. So then I go ask my grandniece, who's 11,
They know. They know.
what's this? Oh, yeah, Auntie, well, they're up on everything.
Yeah,
And
they
then when they
know.
send me their Christmas list, I'm like, huh? I have to talk to their parents. What is this stuff they want? Anyway,
Yeah, I know.
it's hard to keep up. So I can understand why you wouldn't want to pigeonhole something, because then that locks your book into a certain cultural, what's the word, touch point.
Yeah, of course. And I
Yeah.
think like, definitely so far, I think more adults are reading it. And then the adults, the moms or the grandmas are giving it to their teens. And then I'm getting emails from the teens. But it's coming from the moms. And Salon has this really close relationship with her mom. And
Yes.
you see that it's heartbreaking how much she wants her mom now when she didn't need her so much before, and how much her mom is struggling with not knowing where she is or what happened. This is like a parent's worst nightmare, right? And so I think moms are really taking to it. And then I hear like a lot of teachers are loving it because of Mr. Eck, and a lot of psychologists. And so it's been interesting. You write a book just hoping that it just lands in the right arms and in front of the right eyes. And then you're just surprised when it's so many different types of people, which is so great. So great.
I'm actually going to recommend this to my book club because we're all about the same age. We all grew up together, but I just think
Oh,
that they would really enjoy this book.
thank
And I
you.
think partly it's because they're like me, they're older and they've lost people. And
Yeah.
from my perspective, being the age I am, I'm going to be 70.
You don't look it, girl. You don't look it.
Thank you, but you didn't see me when I woke up. Um, I mean, it's just time goes so fast. I can't even believe,
I
you know.
know. I know.
Um, but from my perspective, reading it, I'm sure it's different than a teenager's, and I just think
Yeah.
there's a lot for grown-ups to talk about in here. Especially you mentioned the mom component. Like
Yeah.
my heart just broke for that woman,
I know.
and especially because it's a mystery. What in the heck? That's that I need to know what happened
Yeah.
to my child if I'm going to move forward and not have my child. And it was her
Of,
only child,
of
which is
course.
even worse.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
there's an important point to this book that I brought out when I wrote about it on Instagram. Um, from my perspective, this is a book about pivoting, which is a word that Michelle Obama really brought to the forefront for a lot of us with her writing and her appearances. She talked a lot about having to learn to pivot.
Yeah.
And so that word kind of took on a new importance. To me, there's a lot of that message in this book because let's face it, they don't have a choice. They are where they are.
Yeah.
They're not coming back. They're old. They have to. I mean, this is a big weighty topic. These are kids, and they have to accept their old life is dead. That's
Yeah.
hard enough for a mature adult.
Yeah.
Like if people have lost jobs, they've lost homes. I'm brought back to Matt Whitten, an author I spoke with recently, who lost his house in the Palisades fire. That
Yeah.
old, that old life in that home literally died that day. Yes, he and his family are safe and they're fine, but that's a loss that we,
It's still
we don't want
loss.
to minimize. There's so many things that you can lose along the way in your life, and you have to pivot. Life has to go on. Whether
Yes.
we're the ones here losing the loved one who went there, or you're the loved one there and you figure out you can't come back and you're done with us. And to me, that's one of the big messages, and it's one of the things that your characters have to learn about is acceptance.
Yeah, which is hard. And I think, the book is for people who've lost a loved one or lost something important, and also for people who have lost a part of themselves along the way, because that happens. And I think that was part of what happened that in this book was that every character had to reinvent themselves. They had to
Yeah,
pivot because
yeah.
they were no longer who they once were with all of the things they once had, and we're all that person at some point in our lives, right? And so
Right.
I feel like that comes through in the book where it's like, how do you find hope in a future when you can't imagine it any other way than what your life has been? It's not easy, but it can be done.
And you demonstrated it beautifully again. I mean, it's just
Thank
every
you.
layer of this book is just so well done. I do want to mention one more thing about this. It just clicked in my brain. We are speaking during Transgender Awareness Month,
Yes.
and you do have LGBTQIA plus representation in the book
Yes.
for people who are looking to read books that fall within that I hate to say category, but that uh,
Yeah,
genre,
that's a
and
category.
are
Yeah.
looking to find that kind of a storyline. It's in here, and I
Yeah.
won't say where or who, but there is representation in the book, which is excellent. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's great too, and
Thank you.
it kind of sneaks up on you.
It does. It does. And I wanted it to be like that. I mean, as someone in the queer community and, I wanted that to be natural. I wanted it to be authentic. I didn't w- I wanted it to be like what happens in a real life when you're exploring your identity, I just wanted it to be natural, and so I feel like people will see themselves in it without it screaming at them, and that's what I'm hoping.
Oh, it was beautiful the way it was done. It was just like it was natural, and I just went, oh, okay.
Yeah, this is here.
I mean, it's just like I didn't see that coming, but it doesn't matter. It's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and,
absolutely.
and it was again kind of one of the mysteries in a way,
Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly. It is.
it kind of resolved some other things. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Perfect. I love it.
Layers here, you can teach a class, you can do a semester class on this book, and like in college, like a literature course. Let's analyze.
That would
I don't
be
know.
so
Make
fun. I
videos,
might
but
have
that
to
would be
think about that.
so. Now, are you a fiction writer going forward? Tell
I
me
think
this isn't a
so.
one and done because you did
No.
such a good job. Please write more. Are you working on something?
Thank you. So I'm not working on anything at the moment. I have another self-help book coming out in 2027 that's already written. So I'm going to
Okay.
take a break for a minute. There may be a salon adventure too. We'll see. I've thought of, some ideas for that. Um, I'm working on a possible TV film, project related to salon because I think she would be a perfect star. So, that
Oh,
that's something that I'm
yeah.
thinking about. Yeah, so I have a couple of things, in the works, but I think I probably will write more fiction once I recover from writing this fiction. But it was
Yeah.
so much fun. It was so much fun. Sometimes books are more fun once you've written them than during writing them, but I hope that because I learned so much writing this book, the next book will be a little smoother, right? We'll see.
Maybe take less than 10 years.
It should take less than 10 years. My nonfiction books only take a few months, like 3 to 6 months. And people always ask me when I teach writing, how long does it take to write a book? And I always say, it takes exactly as long as you have. When I have 3 months to write a book, it takes me every day of 3 months. When I have 10 years to write a book, because I don't have a deadline, it takes me 10 years. And so, hopefully the next book will have a deadline. This one was sort of just I was doing as like a passion project and it turned into a real thing.
Yeah. Well, I bet you're getting fabulous reviews across the board because I know you got a bunch of them on Instagram.
I did. Thank you. The reception and feedback has been just amazing. And again, just hearing, just something that touched somebody, a character, a line, a part of the storyline has been just really just so rewarding. Makes it all worth it. And I think my cousin and my dad watching hopefully through their telly on the other side are pretty excited too.
Well, I loved it. Like I said, I love when I take a book and I have really no expectations, and then all of a sudden I'm like, what? I'm just dragged into it. I mean, that's just a great experience. That's what we all look for as readers, right?
Yes.
Speaking of reading, have you read anything recently yourself? Are you a big reader? And any books that you can recommend, fiction or nonfiction, whatever you're reading these days, to folks watching?
Sure. So I am reading, but it takes me a while to get back into reading after I've been writing. So I am reading a book called I'll Have What She's Having, which
Oh,
is based on Nora Ephron's work, her books, and her movies. So When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, and it's all about, it says how Nora Ephron's three iconic films saved romantic comedy. And it's all about Hollywood and writing and making movies, and it's really, really fun.
that
Um,
sounds really interesting.
it's very interesting, and it talks about, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan and how these movies got put together, and I really love that. And I live in Manhattan in an area called the Upper West Side, where a lot of the filming for When Harry Met Sally and some of these You've Got Mail was filmed here, so it's kind of a fun read and a totally different read than what I've been working on. And then for fiction, one of my all-time favorite fiction books, I think it is the most perfect fiction book that I've ever read, just had everything. It's called Nothing to See Here.
Mm,
And I don't know if you've ever read it. Now I'm out by Kevin Wilson. And
I've
it was
heard.
it was one of the first fiction books I read that made me feel like I really have to read more fiction. And it's just kind of a perfect story. It moves quickly, but it has depth and it's funny and it's tender. And I would recommend Kevin Wilson's book to anyone.
Excellent. Well, I have to tell you, I've been to the Upper West Side, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's so exciting. I love that. Well, if you come again, you have to come visit me. Now you know.
Well, I had a very dear friend, and he had
Oh,
two apartments in a building on West 72nd Street. It was called the
that's
Oliver
my
Cromwell
street.
Building. You live on 72nd?
Yeah, I'm not in the Oliver Cromwell, but it's across the street. I can see it from our apartment. How
The
funny is
Oliver
that?
Cromwell was across the street from the Dakota,
Yes, we live next to the
right
Dakota.
off of Central Park.
I can
And
see
my
it from my window. I can see the Oliver Cromwell. How
that is
funny.
yeah, my friend's name was Clint Ritchie. He
Okay.
was an actor, and he was one of the stars of soap opera One Life to Live. I don't know if
Okay. Oh,
anybody out
yeah.
there
I
ever watched
loved
One Life
that.
to Live. Oh, well, he was Clint Buchanan.
Oh my gosh. That is hilarious. That and All My Children I watched with my grandma during high school.
So I went to New York a few times and we hung out, and I went to his apartments. And I remember one Saturday night, my friend lived on Staten Island. So we drove into the city
Yeah.
and we couldn't find a place to park. And we bribed the parking attendant in the Dakota to let us park in their garage for $20 and go across the street to Clint's place. And that's as close as I've ever gotten to the Dakota.
That's so fun. It's not
I was
easy
in
to
the
get.
garage.
Yeah, it's not easy. Our building actually shares the garage with the Dakota. So that's so
Right.
funny. Yeah, it's
I
really
know
funny.
right where you are.
What a
That
small
is
world.
so funny. Yeah, when he retired, he sold both apartments, and then he came back to California because Clint Buchanan was a cowboy, and
Yeah.
on the show, Clint Buchanan had a ranch that he used to go back to that was supposed, I think, was supposed to be in Texas. That was called the Happy Horse Ranch, right?
Yeah.
Clint's real ranch was 90 minutes from my house here in Lodi. It was up kind of off Highway 80, like you're going on your way to Reno, and you
Okay.
cut off go up toward Grass Valley in that
Yeah.
area. He had 60 acres tucked away back there, and it was called the Happy
Wow.
Horse Ranch.
That sounds like a
And
happy
it was
place to be.
well, they based his character in part on him because he was supposed to be, I forget what the character's name was supposed to be, something else. And when he went for the audition, they called him up and they said, "Can we just use your real name and can this just be Clint?"
I
Because
love it.
it fit so perfectly. And he ended up being on that show for like more than 20 years.
I
And
love
it's
it.
so funny because he used to laugh about he'd go to New York and he'd say, because I said, I go to the ranch, and you can't hear a thing for miles around except the horses whinnying, because he always had like 35 horses
Yeah.
somewhere out in the pastures. And I said, "Why so many horses?" He said, "Why not?" I went, "All right, whatever." Um,
Perfect. Why not?
and anything that needed a home found one at Happy Horse. People were constantly
Oh,
dropping off dogs and cats, and they knew
I
Clint
can
would take them in.
imagine.
but you know, it would just be so quiet, and then once in a while the sprinklers would come on, and you'd hear that, you know, in the pastures,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then we went to New York, and I remember sitting in his living room and going, "How do you live here with all this noise?"
Yeah.
Right? And he goes, "Honey, let me tell you what happened. I go home to the ranch and it's too quiet and I can't sleep because the only thing
Yes.
I hear is my dog snoring, right?
Yes.
Then I just nicely get acclimated and it's time to come back to New York. And then I can't sleep because of the traffic. And then I
I
have to
get
read,
it.
you know, it was just so funny because he would go back and forth all the time, you know, and
That's
then he
so
just finally
funny.
retired and he was done. And he's actually one of the dear friends that I lost a few years ago. But that is
Oh,
such a small world. When you said 72nd Street, I was right back there
such a
in my
small
brain.
world. Such a
That
small
is,
world. Well, now you
yeah,
visit me next time.
I will.
And
Broadway shows.
yes, 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 yes. And oh, thank
It's
you.
been so nice talking with you. So
Thank
delightful.
you. Thank
And
you.
you know, again, let's hold up all the fun stuff that you guys sent. I just loved it when I opened up the mail and I had this case and I was like, what am I gonna do here? You know, but it all
So
worked out.
fun.
So everybody go out and get the book, visit Amy's website, and you can read more about her self-help books and about her background there. It's quite fascinating. There's more detail than we went into today about body mind healing and stuff.
Yeah.
And then grab this and go curl up with your favorite beverage and get
Oh,
yourself immersed in learning how to pivot
I love
and
it.
how to move on and how to focus on the good things about death as opposed to how awful it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was the best. I really enjoyed this hour with you.
This was fun. So, everybody, have a great weekend. I will be back next week. I have another author chat on Thursday, and I think you're going to like that one. It's another book that I discovered through the Thriller Lovers Book Club. Thank you, Tanya. Another shout out for our leader.
Thanks, Tanya.
And everybody tune in next week. Bye bye.
Bye.